Hello and welcome. Namo Buddhaya. This hour of the morning, it's around 4:15 a.m. now, here in Sri Lanka, is a peaceful time. 3 a.m., 4 a.m. is considered in many religions, philosophies, traditions to be a spiritual time for practice, for meditation, contemplation, reflection. But it must be remembered it's also very practical for all of those purposes, in that it is relatively, compared to the rest of the day, very peaceful. And here, where it's particularly hot currently, certainly from 9 a.m. until about 6 p.m, it's almost unbearably hot, I dare say. But it is being borne, I'm bearing with it, and I do have a fan in my kuti, and I have the privilege of shade there, also amongst these trees in this little corner of the mangroves. So I'm very fortunate, but we must remember there are those that are not, and there are also those that rely on air conditioning and other modern comforts. I think those perhaps are the ones who are suffering more. I took one of the cats to the vet yesterday, whom dear little chap was suffering quite badly and needed to go to the veterinary practice, which had moved since our last visit 2 weeks ago, so it was a longer tuk-tuk journey. But to show how ill the little fellow was, he sat on my lap in the tuk-tuk the whole journey without a struggle, there and back. And we were there for the tuk-tuk driver and myself for some two hours whilst he received treatment, but it was in an air-conditioned room. And I noticed it when I got in, acclimatized to it, and didn't notice it anymore. My attention was on holding Spotty Dotty still whilst he underwent, well, some horrible treatments, really, the poor fellow. Anyway, he's doing well now. He's eating very well, and I have to take him back again this morning to the same vet, where I will enjoy once again the air conditioning of that room and make the most of it, because as I exited the room, the heat hit me, and I realized the kind of heat that ordinarily people are dealing with throughout the day. And on that journey you see men working by the side of the road, digging trenches, making concrete, all of these kinds of things in temperatures that would restrict ordinary work in the country where I come from. I remember some hot summers when even schools were closed because it was too hot. Temperatures which are quite usual here each and every day of the year. But this time of the morning is a beautiful time to use for its natural coolness, peacefulness and quiet. And that applies wherever you are. Finding that peace within us also is very important. But whilst the conditions are conducive towards doing that, it's a great opportunity to develop the skill of seeing clearly, that we call in the Pali language vipassana, the nature of these bodily feelings, our emotional feelings, and being with the conditions as they are in the present moment, here and now. And this is how we bear with things. This is how we develop khanti, patient endurance. The highest of austerities, the Buddha said, is khanti, patient endurance. Not torturing oneself, but being able to bear with it as it is, rather than wishing it was otherwise, which is only bringing about more suffering. When we know nothing else, we don't wish it to be anything else. So this is why I said people with the air conditioning are less fortunate, because when you're in that room for 2 hours with full-on air conditioning, cool, even in my robes, I wasn't hot. I had to keep my full robes on because I was in technically a public place and personally wasn't receiving medical treatment. So ordinarily that would have been quite difficult, but it was fine. But as soon as you leave that room, then it's taken away from you. So we develop with this practice the ability to be with whatever it is as it is, rather than using too much in the way of external support. Making the most of these opportunities early in the morning to develop those skills and see clearly the situation as it is, not being remissive of it, but knowing the nature of change, uncertainty, impermanence, anicca. Seeing our suffering clearly, suffering, dukkha, and the realization that we cannot control those those circumstances immediately surrounding us, or even the way we're responding to those circumstances within. But we can train through the training of our minds to be more equanimous, really settled with whatever situations we face. So, continuing with the comments and questions today, the first comment, and I'm not sure how far back this goes, so apologies if I'm a little bit behind again. Sometimes the comments and questions come in thick and fast. I might take the opportunity one day to talk on just general matters of Dharma, but still questions build up in the background. So I'll try and move on and get to all of your comments and all of your questions, which are all read. But let me just remind you once again, only the first line. I read the entire comment that is posted. Any subsequent comments responding to that comment by other contributors, even that same contributor, I do not see. This thread, this chain of conversation that emanates from one comment is not something I get involved with. Simply because it is chat, and it's great that you have conversations amongst yourselves via that platform using that means. But it's not for me to be involved with debates and discussions on any topic, even of Dharma, in that format, in that environment. That to me is social media, which is something I don't need or use as part of my practice. But I do attend very carefully to each and every comment I receive, and where appropriate, respond to it here in these talks, recorded online for your benefit, but also for my benefit, because by way of exploring these topics, I develop my own understanding and practice. So sometimes, for example, I'll answer this comment and then another response might come back from that person after I've responded. Well, if I were to go on to that chain of events after each and every comment, there would be literally way too many for me to spend that amount of time reading all of the replies. So apologies if you feel missed out. And in regards to any comments that disappear, that is not necessarily my doing. I've only ever had to make disappear 1 or 2 comments in the entire time of ever having to or ever recording these talks. And that was because they may have caused offence to someone else. Not me, or generally, but other people or other organisations of which I'm not a part, or collectively we're not a part, and seemed inappropriate. So nothing is left out or edited in that respect. So don't feel that you don't have your chance to speak. But please, one has to obviously be mindful of many people reading these, and language and the way things are put is very important. Right speech is an important aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path, as we all know. So this first comment, Bhante, you were adamant about us keeping the 5 precepts, especially no intoxication. But how does having a few drinks, let's say every month, can affect your mindfulness overall? Is it not? It's not on a daily basis, not on weekends, so how does infrequent alcohol use affect mindfulness overall? After all, something as simple as a daydreaming can affect mindfulness, and that can happen all of the time. Well, daydreaming isn't to be recommended, sitting just daydreaming, but one can sit and reflect. It's a very useful way of expanding the depths and powers of the mind to analyse and understand. The opposite effect on the mind is intoxicating it by whatever means, drugs or alcohol. So ask yourself this question with regards to the 5th precept. If it's only on these few occasions, when you have a few drinks, then why? Why do you have a few drinks? You're asking me the question, how does this affect mindfulness overall? Overall, the point of taking intoxicants of any kind is to take away mindfulness, to soften, take the edges off, as people might say, soften the contact, the sense contact one is having, sense consciousness. In Pali we call vijnana. So all we're experiencing, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking about, when one dulls the mind through alcohol, for example, things seem better. People seem more attractive. What we're saying and the way we're speaking may sound less harsh to you, or if you're under intoxication, that of others. Not so kind speech might sound less harsh as a result of the dulling of this mind. And therefore it isn't true mindfulness, it's not the reality, the truth of this sense consciousness, this experience you're having. And for that point, that reason is why we take intoxicants, or people take intoxicants, to dull the senses, to seemingly chill, to relax. Now the question you should ask yourself is, why do you once a month, or so on and so forth, feel you have to do this? That's more the important question. I don't know the answer. I can only say it's because you're wanting, on occasions, not to have mindfulness. Well, this is not the practice the Buddha teaches us. We're developing the skills to be mindful throughout all of our waking hours, from the moment we wake until the moment we go to sleep, every day, all of the time. Because it is only from mindfulness that we can really appreciate and enjoy the true experience. Having realized this impermanence, this nature of uncertainty and change in all situations, rather than dulling and obscuring that situation in some way, we can experience it fully for what it is. It might not be enjoyable at the time, but certainly the subsequent experiences will be more enhanced in their qualities and enjoyable as a result of having got used to more uncomfortable times, and rather than dulling the mind in those situations. This isn't coming from a point of view of someone who's not drank in their lives. I used to drink a lot, and then I just stopped. And I haven't for now had used intoxicants for 16 years, I think, 15, 16 years. But I used to use intoxicants every day from my teenage years, throughout my life, for over 20 years. And at the time, I didn't really know why I was doing that. It was just what everyone did at the time in the circles in which I mixed. And that's another thing you should ask yourself. If you're doing this alone, well then it's probably more of a problem. But if you're doing this to be social and going out socializing with others whom like to drink, of just a few drinks on occasions, as you say, how are they behaving? How are they speaking? How are they living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path whilst drinking? You'll see that they're most likely not to be. And if by not drinking with them you feel a little uncomfortable, that is because you're seeing the truth, whereas they are not. So it's possibly not a good idea to be associating with such people in those situations. You could see them on other occasions when they're not drinking. Maybe it's the case that in those circumstances you don't like them so much, or they don't like you so much. Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? If you need to drink to like people, then you're not really seeing the truth of the situation, the reality. Okay. Okay, quite a long one here. So in this video, well, I don't know what video it is relating to exactly, but we'll give it a go. You discussed rebirth as a sort of metaphor for the changes of apparent identity we experience through karma, cause and effect in this biological lifetime. I've heard many Theravada Buddhist monks specifically discuss rebirth in the context of multiple eons of biological lives, i.e. literal birth and death. Can this idea of consciousness persisting but reconstituting into aggregates after biological death be verified through direct knowledge in the Eightfold Path? As an example, I have heard Theravada practitioners teach meditation forms that discern past biological lives. This implies direct knowing of rebirth beyond the metaphor you described. So I don't really comment on other people's teachings, views, opinions, ideas, philosophies, religions, beliefs. I try to share with you my own common experiences, or my own experiences, some of which are hopefully common with your own practices. And living within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path, is a way to discern, determine, establish right view, the first fold of the Noble Eightfold Path. And right view is the understanding of the characteristics of existence, some of which we've just mentioned: anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. The nature of karma, which is also what you just mentioned, the fact of all of our actions, karma means actions, are the causes and consequences, or the causes and conditions for future consequences. So all of our actions have results. Squeaky Pops is lively this morning in there, shouting. I hope he's not too loud for you. He's certainly very healthy. So The noble and the nature of rebirth is another fundamental aspect of right view. Now, this does not mean that in right view you have to be able to recall or remember past lives. Maybe as a part of psychic abilities developed through deeply absorbed states of meditation, this is an ability you develop. Among other many psychic abilities, practitioners skilled in the practice of deeply absorbed meditation might be able to develop. However, these are not the goal or the intention behind the practice. So the second fold of the Noble Eightfold Path is right intention, right view, right intention. And this is all about really the intention behind our practice. Firstly, based on sila, the keeping of moral virtue, and our goals to become free from suffering within this lifetime and free from clinging to this presence, this bodily form and this thinking brain and all it entails, and therefore creating the causes and conditions for future rebirth. It is not something that is specifically said or taught, as I understand in the suttas, that sense consciousness, that of the khandhas, the aggregates, what make up this body, being the body itself, including the sense organs, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, the skin, the thinking brain, so the senses of the body and the body itself, its presence here, its solidity, its elementary form, its solidity, its liquidity, its gaseousness, heat, and the space within it and the space in which it abides. This is all part of the human existence. This, along with its feelings, physical feelings and mental emotions, the thought process, thinking, volitional formations or mental formations, as a result of all phenomena it experiences, are still part of this human existence, this current birth. And sense consciousness, vijnana, is all contact internally to the external environment in which we are born into. This does not continue, this does not remain. What remains is the citta in its purest form, not of this conditioned world, and has the ability, when letting go of attachment to this existence and any existence via the means of these khandhas, consider it a vehicle if you like, to be liberated from rebirth. At death, we don't know exactly what happens, but there's nothing to say, even from the Buddhist point of view, where there are many people who can recall past lives through these psychic experiences. There's nothing to say that there is the proof, the evidence as to what happens next, nor is there really any need to know. The understanding of karma, as a result of our actions, we will be the heirs to those actions, is what needs to be understood. And where I've described in the context within this life of changes of the body, that is just illustrative, allegorical of how we are so different as babies to grown-ups, or teenagers to grown-ups to old people. But in those circumstances, that is a continuum of consciousness in the very sense consciousness sense, vijnana. That at death is also something that dies, as is intellectual knowledge, memory, information we've gathered by our thinking brains through that lifetime. But you know, a teenager will learn something and remember it as an adult and remember it as a very old person. But after death, those things cannot be remembered. other than through maybe some psychic abilities where one can delve into the depths of what we do not know and understand scientifically, and is not explained in the suttas by the Buddha or his disciples in a literal sense, but people have been known to do that. But this is not the goal. The goal is to be free from suffering and attachment to this life. This is the practice. So I haven't really fully understood the question specifically you're asking. In fact, I can't even see a question mark in there saying, please explain this. But yes, there is, I think. Where is it? Can this idea of consciousness persisting be reconstituted into aggregates after biological death be verified through direct knowledge in the Eightfold Path? The answer is no. The whole experience of the Noble Eightfold Path, the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, might lead to some psychic abilities to do that, but it is not the goal, the aim of the Noble Eightfold Path. So apologies, you do have a question mark there, and that is the question. But the answer is no. The Noble Eightfold Path is what it is. Developing right view, intention, right speech, actions, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and meditation, samadhi. In samadhi, deeply absorbed states of meditation and jhana, one might develop some psychic abilities to be able to recall past lives. Certainly you cannot predict future lives, and whatever you recall in this life might not be retained in future lives. Almost certainly won't be. So the next question, can an older man over 50 become a monk and achieve liberation and nirvana? Yes, you can. We say nibbana in this Pali language tradition. I don't adhere to this particular whole idea of being one tradition, one school, but there are two distinct traditions in terms of the northern school and the southern school. The southern school being originated from the places closest to, immediately surrounding India, and use the Pali language, something close to the old original ancient languages of India that might have been used by the Buddha, whereas the northern school uses the more ancient language of Sanskrit, which, yes, also is perhaps where Pali comes from and originates from, and would have been around those places at that times. But in this day and age, the way it is that there is this division between the southern school using the Pali language and the northern school using the Sanskrit language. The peculiar thing is, in a country like Sri Lanka, because they have a complex language, native language, Sinhala, which is made up of Sanskrit, Pali, and even English and other languages. They kind of use a bit of both. It becomes a lot rather confusing if you don't have a common denominator in language, in the form of language. The beauty of Buddhism, and actually any religion, because most religions have their own scriptural languages. So in Christianity there is, in modern Christianity, there's Latin, which is common in all countries. So if you're Catholic, you'll know Latin perhaps more than other more modern Christian institutions. But the beauty of knowing that language-based scriptural teachings, form of scriptural teachings, is that it's common in all countries. Similarly with Pali in the southern school tradition and Sanskrit in the northern school traditions. So when I say anicca, dukkha, anatta, that is understood all over the southern tradition area, region. India, Sri Lanka, Laos, Burma, or Myanmar, Thailand, and so on and so forth. Sanskrit, going up into the sort of northern reaches of India, into the Himalayas and into China and Japan and all of these places and what have you. So I've gone a bit off the track there, but your age is, there's only a minimum age for ordination, and that is the age of 20. You can ordain even younger than that into novice ordination. Take Pabaja, it's called, the first stage of ordination. so you're a novice, a trainee, from the age where you're big enough to scare a crow. So that could be any age, a toddler. A child can become a little monk, a baby monk. But to be a bhikkhu, a fully ordained bhikkhu, take upasampada, you have to be age 20. And age 50 is not too old. I think I was approaching 50. And in some places they do have a cut-off age, but you can just go somewhere else, or you can discuss your individual circumstances with those people. The main thing is you do need to be rather fit and healthy when you ordain, because although you can't guarantee how long that will be for, whether you're young or old, you don't know how your health will change. It helps to be able to begin the training, which is quite arduous, if you are physically fit, mentally fit and healthy, physically and mentally fit and healthy when you take up ordination. So go for it, 50 or not. Right, if a person has enough money to never have to work and they are able to live a simple solitary life with minimal responsibilities, devoting themselves to meditation and keeping the 5 precepts, would this kind of lay life be just as conducive to attaining arahantship as ordaining as a monastic? Why would someone choose to ordain if they had the means to live that way instead? So 2 questions there. The answer to the first question is yes, potentially, if you can do it. If you have the discipline, the determination, the commitment to your practice, and you're not distracted by worldly life. Really, even the process of perhaps preparing your food and cooking is okay. It's not going to, it can be done mindfully, like as we do in monasteries. As lay practitioners living in monasteries, often find ourselves in the kitchens working, preparing food, cooking food, and cleaning up after the meal. So these are all conducive towards the practice. Ultimately, however, when one becomes an arahant, the enthusiasm for those activities, other than by way of necessary function, will be diminished to some extent. It's not going to be there, but you'll be able to survive. As you say, you're in a quite, this situation you're describing is quite unique. When I say quite unique, how long does this source of income or these funds last for? None of us know how long we're going to live. None of us know how long we'll be able to keep that money for. We might have it invested in cash, we might have it invested in bricks and mortar, in some other form, commodity, some gold or whatever, shares. The value of everything goes up and down, and none of it is necessarily permanent. Governments can take it away. Changes of governments, values can be eroded. Then what happens? But let's say, you've got the ideal situation, you could never spend the money that you have, and you can set everything up around you perfectly. If you have the absolute determination and you follow the teachings of the Buddha to the word, then technically speaking, yes, one could achieve great attainments in this practice. But the likelihood is, without support of the Sangha, without other fellow practitioners to share your experiences with, more importantly in the first and early years of your practice, more senior practitioners whom have been at it for a lot longer, many years, more than 10 years for instance, able to share their experience of that with you. In the absence of that, it might be very difficult to stay within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path. But it could be done. Why would someone choose to ordain if they had the means to live that way instead? Well, it would be for that support. Now personally, I could have continued living I didn't have unlimited resources as you described, but I could have continued living without having to work, independently really of the external world, for the foreseeable future. But I chose to ordain because I needed the training, I needed the experience of those other than just what I could read in the sutras. You need a certain amount of interpretation of those sutras from those that have lived the life and put all of the teachings of the Buddha into practice in monastic form. A form he established for that purpose. The Buddha himself had a life of luxury and everything he could wish for, and exactly the circumstances that you describe there. But in order to find contentment, he went out on that first very austere path of practice for 6 years, and then when he attained to enlightenment, established the teachings we now follow within the Noble Eightfold Path, and established the Sangha over a 45-year period of teaching and training and setting up the Sangha as we know it today, unchanged. And the Buddha did that, and he is our prime example and teacher, and with whom we take, in that example, refuge in. And whose teachings, the Dharma, we take refuge in. And his disciples and the representatives of those in their lineage to this day, the Sangha, with whom we take refuge in. So it will soon become apparent that that's the case as your practice develops, and like the Buddha, you would wish to ordain. Next question. Can you give me a rundown of your daily routine from waking up to sleep time? Well, yes, going to the vet and other incidentals excluded, it's very simple. I wake up at 3 a.m. for meditation, and currently, on a few days of the week, at around this time, 4 a.m., I will record this talk, which requires no preparation, no planning, and no subsequent editing. So that's it. It doesn't take long. As long as this video is for as long as that takes in my day. So if it's 40 minutes, it's 40 minutes. The rest is done by YouTube. It's uploaded, it goes on at a certain time predetermined by myself, but that's all standard. It just happens automatically. It's all automated. So I wake up at 3 for meditation until 6, unless I have this talk to record in the meantime. But 6 a.m. I have live chanting, short meditation and blessings, which is also on YouTube, aired as a live stream at 6 a.m. Indian Standard Time every day. That's only until 6:30. As the sun's coming up, 6:30 a.m., I then go on Pindapata, arms round, we call it, which is how I get fed. I take my bowl, I walk from here into the village and then further into the town, and that's about 4 kilometers and takes me about an hour. And at the end of that route, I sit down at a little cafe, which is empty at that time of day because it's still only 7:30 in the morning, and usually someone brings me a drink there, and a tuk-tuk comes and collects me. I then, with the tuk-tuk, we go to the hospital, which is on that route. So as we're returning back to here, my kuti, we stop at the local government hospital where I distribute all of that food, with the exception of what I'm going to eat for that day: a packet of curry and rice, maybe some chickpeas, a banana or two, some breads, buns, something like that. The rest of it is all surplus to my requirements. So I give it to the patients in the men's ward, the ladies' ward and the children's ward, and when there's a lot, which is most days, also the nurses and the doctors and the other helpers in the hospital. So I get the opportunity to practice, well, it's not practice, it's enjoy giving, enjoy generosity there. It's a very interesting and beautiful hospital, very old-fashioned, but it's very peaceful. It has a beautiful Bodhi tree, a beautiful Buddha shrine, nice cloisters to keep people walking from one ward to another out in the shade. So it's very much has the appearance of a monastery. Not a monastery here, but the sort of monasteries we see in the West. The supposed what a monastery should look like. Well, that's kind of a traditional government hospital here, whereas what a monastery should look like, a monastery here, isn't quite what one might imagine. Anyway, that's at around 7:30, 7:45, and takes about 20 minutes and half an hour. And I'm usually back to my kuti here in the tuk-tuk with my food and any other surplus offerings that I've received, like large fruits, bunches of bananas, melons, mangoes, papayas, which aren't practical to give to the patients and nurses in the hospital, big bottles of liquids or things like that. I bring all those back to here at 8 o'clock, and my own food, which all goes on the table just there on this veranda, and people whom are local will come and collect anything they need that I can offer them, share it out with them. And I usually light some incense and candles in Samadhi Sala, the meditation hall just there. It's because sometimes people come at that time and start meditating. It's still relatively cool up until 9 o'clock compared to the rest of the day, so a good time in there to meditate. In fact, in there, in the meditation hall, with the fans on, it's good shade, a high roof, ventilated high roof, so it stays relatively cool, cooler than my kuti. So people can be meditating in there at any time during the day. People come and go, it isn't formal, there's no program. So this takes us to about 8 o'clock. At 8 and around 8:15 to 8:30, I sit back in my kuti and I eat my meal. This takes around half an hour or so, after which I clear up, tidy up. Usually by 9 o'clock, 9:30, I'm finished. Finished my meal, finished clearing up. Then things might happen. I had to go to the vets, or I might be seeing some people that are coming to visit, to talk to, people coming for devotional practices, precepts, or taking refuge, people coming to offer dana by way of requisites for the... There's nothing that's really needed here. Again, this is things that I have to share amongst other people, really, but people like to do that here. And other things that may go on. But ideally, that is my time. Then I have free then from 9 o'clock until really about 3 in the afternoon, where I could just meditate. I can and do just meditate. Maybe usually at around, I've left something out at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I normally have a coffee time. I have a cup of coffee and sit down, go through all of your comments and your emails and reply to them all. But that never takes more than about an hour in total. Rosie Pops, I'm sorry, you want to come for your food, haven't you? It's a bit early, you should sit there and I'll be with you in a minute. So then 3 o'clock in the afternoon is time for washing and cleaning of myself and maybe some part of my 3 robes. And then from about sort of 4, then it's free again, time to relax. It's getting a little bit cooler. Sometimes there may be visitors, usually not. Then 6 o'clock in the evening, usually it's time to back into the Samadhi Sala for a little sort of formal sitting meditation, maybe some chanting, some reflections, but lighting some incense and some candles. And then the next 3 hours up until about 9 o'clock can either be spent in there or in my kuti, walking, sitting, and then go on any time until it's time to really go to sleep, which can be any time from between 9 o'clock and midnight, depending on what's been going on in the day, what I have to do in relation to speaking with others or anyone that might be visiting or around and about. So it's a very simple day. I hope that's also given some other insights into the various aspects of that day and not just repeated the same old routine. But it's very simple. Wake at 3, meditate. puja, meditation, blessings at 6, or morning puja 6, alms round 6:30, eating, or hospital dana, we call it hospital dana, 7:30, return here for more sharing at 8, eating at 8:30, cleaning up and what have you at 9, free by 9:30 for the day's meditation. 3 o'clock, washing, ablutions, so to speak. 6 p.m. or 4 o'clock is usually tea time as well, when I usually have a cold drink rather than hot tea. But then 6 o'clock is evening puja. That's it, very simple, basic routine. You gave up, okay. You gave up life in England. How can one do the same? To study under a master, to live life in pursuit of peace and enlightenment. Just to do it. So, I mean, it's not so much, you can, the master, our real teacher is the Buddha, but you'll need the support of a sangha, so many masters, many teachers, like a school. You don't have just one teacher. There may be a headmaster, so a chief monk or an abbot, they call them in England. But you can visit monasteries firstly in your own country. If you're coming from England, you may not be, it's not clear where you're coming from, but wherever you are, if there's not monasteries, you would need to go to another country. But if you're coming from England, there are many. So visit monasteries, go to the monasteries, and when I say there's many, there's not a huge number, but England's not, by comparison to India, it's a very small country physically. So you can get from one end of England to the other in the same time as it takes to get from the side of one state in India to the other. So Karnataka, which was the state I spent most of my time in India, is the size of the whole of England, Scotland and Wales. You can turn England, Scotland and Wales on its side and it fits into Karnataka, physically speaking. And I was travelling all over India to go to different monasteries. So it's like a whole continent. It's larger than the whole of Europe. So it's, many states. It's like many countries within a country. So it depends, how far you're prepared to travel. But if you're in England, just go to the nearest Buddhist monastery and get in touch with them. And you'll be guided in the way of the teachings of the Buddha. And he is the master, he's your teacher. And to begin with, you can read the suttas, or you can just read the chanting book, which has summaries of the suttas within it. And if you email me, I'll send you a link to a chanting book that has both English and Pali language versions of each chant, which includes the suttas and the core teachings of the Buddha, really, in their essence, and is a very good way to begin learning what those core teachings are. That's how you do it, and you'll generally graduate from that, from meditating. You need to keep precepts, practice meditation, and this will develop a state of mind that is inclined towards a more secluded and peaceful way of life. Can you speak of raising young children? I'm a mother to a young child and I'm struggling so much. It is mentally and physically exhausting for me. Everything she likes is over-stimulating and loud, and I'm just completely burnt out. How do I handle this? I try to perform being a great mum in time, all the time, but often I hate activities. I feel I have to do all of the day for her benefit. Children need, these days, this is a situation where I can say these days. I often say, why do people say these days? Because this is the way it's always been. To some extent, this is the way it's always been. Children need stimulation. But these days, I I know since I've had children who are now adults, but since those times things were just coming about, like soft play centres and places where one takes children for lots of real overstimulation. But now I gather that they're the thing. Water parks and all of this stuff is the thing, and it's all noisy and loud and lots going on. But at home even, there's tablets, iPads, there's smartphones, there's television, there's all of these things going on. All I can suggest, and this would have applied and did apply in my time, as much as it did in the time of the Buddha and does today, is get into nature if you can, even if it's just a park. Take your daughter, I don't know, you don't say how old she is. Apart from all of these other things they're going to want to be doing because of their association with all of the other children. If you can, by any means, take your daughter to the beach or to the forest, just to the countryside, not to places where everyone goes, where there's cafes and shops, souvenir stores, etc., but to just the middle of nowhere for a few hours. At first they may say, "Oh, I'm bored, Mummy, when are we going, when are we going?" But once they start to run around, get the fresh air and use their imagination, they'll start to naturally enjoy the surroundings of nature and naturally enjoy what they're able to find within themselves. Children are far more easy to please than adults because they haven't covered up what they're born with. That natural purity of being able to just have pleasure in sitting, knowing that they're safe, supported, loved, fed. So go for a picnic. Leave the devices, for safety take your phone in the car or in your bag or whatever, but leave all of the devices and everything turned off and go and sit on grass, sit on stones, sit on sand, put your feet in cold water, feel the breeze, feel the cold, feel the heat, feel the sun, see the clouds or see the sky. Even if you're in a city, there's usually a park and a corner of that park where there's nothing much going on. Or a sports field that is unused at the moment where you can go between games and sit on grass uninterrupted. Without books even, without any entertainment or distraction. Just sit and let the imagination, let nature play out within yourself and your children's selves. Walking in nature, getting into nature, back to basics. Then when you go back into the home where there's all this loudness and these things going on, and I fully do understand what you're saying, it's very difficult and seemingly demanding. It's showing you, as we're taught in the Dharma, that when you try and fuel all of these desires, when you try and satisfy all these desires which are insatiable, they cannot be satisfying, you're just fueling them. And it's the same with your child. I want to do this, I want to do that, when are we going here, when are you going there? If you give them something, I'm not saying you have to be cruel and hold everything, but if you keep giving them another movie, another game, another sweet, taking them here, taking them there, then they're just going to want more. But you can give just as much by saying, I don't know, let's do something different. We'll go and play hide and seek, even in the garden. Or even turn everything off in the house. I mean, as a child, my brother, we didn't have these things in that time, much to entertain ourselves. He used to come up with all kinds of, had an elder brother, imaginative games, which were quite horrific when you think of them today. I've described them before. There was the game where he would sit me on the worktop of the kitchen and put a tea cloth, a rag, and tie it around my eyes so I was blindfolded, and with a teaspoon and with the cupboard which was above my head, with me sitting on the worktop with the cupboards behind me. He'd open all the cupboards and he would take out various jars from the cupboards, which would have pickles or jams or honey or sugar or tea or coffee or whatever in these jars, Marmite, Bovril, all kinds of things, both nice and horrible. And he would just, with me blindfolded, open this packet or a jar, and a teaspoon, he'd put it in my mouth. You see, this was the game, which was more entertaining for him than it perhaps was for me, and it was quite horrific for me at the time. But it was using things around us that weren't overly stimulating. It was stimulating in the sense of taste, but it was just the kind of games that we came up with and entertainment from our imagination before there was daytime TV, But the other game, which I was going to talk about, that I've spoken of before, it's where I get my sort of dispassion for what we call desiccated coconut. Here, every item of food has ground coconut, which is fresh coconut from these palms behind me. And it's very nice, but it reminds me of that game when he'd put a teaspoon of what used to be dried desiccated coconut in a packet that had been there for 20 years because nobody ever used it or knew what it was for, in your mother's pantry cupboard. And when he put that spoon of it in your mouth, you could never get rid of it. It got in your teeth, in your throat, you'd cough, and it was just like indigestible. And I have that memory of that. It deeply affected me, and every item of food I get has some of this sprinkled on it, and I have to carefully move it aside. Anyway, this is aside. I shouldn't be talking about these things. But on a lighter note, then the other game was he'd turn off all the lights. He'd just switch the main power off in the house at night. And in England, it could get dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so this wasn't late into the night. And he called it murder in the dark, which is a bit cruel, but it wasn't as horrific as it sounded. And it was just an advanced form of hide and seek. He would have a torch. This is my older brother. And I'd have to go and hide anywhere in the house. But I had the advantage of darkness. Now, because he'd turn the main power off, so I couldn't turn any lights on. So I'd find a corner in the house and hide for dear life. And if his beam of his torch caught me, that was it. I was dead. I was murdered. It sounds like a horrible game, and I'll get to the point in a minute. But it was really delving into the depths of imagination, using what we had. In fact, turning off what we had. We had light. We turned it off to play in the dark. Now, your eyes got used to it a little bit. There were street lights. It wasn't completely pitch black, but it was dark enough to hide in shadows. But the torch would find its way through the shadows. And this was such a sensual experience, much like the tasting game. But it really did, through that experience, demonstrate and really show through as we understand it now, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, how we respond in the body, how we respond to our feelings, both physically and emotionally, how our minds react to all of these phenomena, how we explore through sense contact when our senses are dulled by way of turning off the light so it's dark and we don't know who's coming other than your creepy brother from the backgrounds, from the shadows, or what's going to be put in our mouth next. Now, I'm not suggesting you play all these games, but by simply going into the forest, going into nature regularly, make it a discipline. Even if you don't want to go or your daughter doesn't want to go, go. Don't go with your earbuds, your headphones and your entertainment. Don't take your phone, or if you're taking your phone, have it on silent. The notifications turned off. And then, of course, the usual things. Well, you must restrict access to all of these things anyway for your children, if you can. You too will benefit, as well as your child benefiting, you too will benefit from this experience of going into nature. Whether it's the beach or the forest or a park or just a farmer's field somewhere. Are there any animal shelters? Places like that take in stray dogs or stray cats or any other animals like that near you, if you live in a city, for instance. Often going to places like that helping, you helping, your child helping, look after others, other beings, animals, our furry friends, dogs and cats. You might not like dogs and cats, so it's not for everybody. But going to places like that can give so much sensual stimulation, but in a good way. Now, I'm not saying those games my brother played with me, which might seem to this day and age like abuse. They're certainly not. They were great fun. But this kind of thing, going to animal shelters and sanctuaries and places like that to help, can really, really explore all of our sensory experience and be stimulating. I mean, of course you have organised things like this, zoos and places, but those kind of places are also designed to stimulate and get people coming back. They're addictive. They leave the customer wanting more, keep coming back, to keep coming back. So I hope that I've left you wanting more and that you will keep coming back to this platform to listen to these talks, which are your voices on this platform and your views and your comments and your questions that are being aired mainly, and that anything that I've said today is of some use, but if not, can be just left and put down and not thought about anymore. But I wish you well in your continued practice until tomorrow. Be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.